They do not wait for prayers or offerings. They do not speak your name. And yet, when your final breath leaves your body, they are there. One with the head of an ox, the other with the face of a horse. Their names are not whispered to bring good luck or health. They are spoken only in dread, in tales passed down at the edge of sleep, or between sips of wine too strong to silence fear. Oxhead and Horseface. Together, they walk the line between life and death. In the realms of the living, they are unseen. But in the moment your soul detaches from your body, when your limbs go cold and the last flicker of warmth fades from your chest, you will see them. The ox with eyes like molten coal, unblinking and heavy with purpose. The horse with a muzzle that never opens, yet somehow speaks to your mind in a voice older than language. These two are not demons, nor are they gods. They are enforcers of balance, servants of a system older than any emperor's rule. The moment your soul steps out of your body, they are already by your side, their towering forms blocking the path back. You may try to run, you may scream, but their grip is absolute. They carry no chains, yet you cannot escape. They bring no weapons, yet no army can stop them. In the vast structure of the afterlife known as Diyu, the 18 hells stretch in every direction, and it is Oxhead and Horseface who bring the dead to its gates. For some, they are a curse. For others, a mercy. When a man dies unjustly, murdered in his sleep, and his soul is too broken to know the way, they come. When a tyrant's breath fails him in the middle of a banquet, and he tries to cling to the living world, they pry him loose. They do not judge. That task belongs to others. Their role is simple, unchangeable. They guide the dead to what comes next. But their path is not straight. For those who lived with kindness, their walk may be short, barely a few steps before the mist parts and the courts of the underworld welcome them. For those who defied the laws of heaven, their walk is long, twisted, filled with echoes and shadows. Oxhead walks ahead, never looking back. Horseface watches the soul closely, making sure no tricks or regrets slow the journey. In rare moments, a soul will beg, will cry, will plead to be returned. And in these moments, Horseface tilts his head slightly, as if to listen. But Oxhead never stops. For once they have come, the wheel is already turning. They are not cruel, but they are firm. Their presence is not of comfort, but of certainty. They wear the uniforms of underworld guardians, but not even other spirits dare speak to them lightly. To see them is to know your time has ended, and yet it is not the end of you. They are not here to destroy, only to deliver. In some paintings, they are shown as monstrous, with red skin and glowing eyes. In others, they seem almost calm, like dutiful soldiers. But their essence is always the same. They are not bound by temples or rituals. They are bound by duty, and their duty never changes. Even the Jade Emperor does not interfere in their work, because to interrupt them is to interrupt death itself. There are stories of monks who saw them moments before their death and smiled. There are tales of emperors who tried to bribe them, only to vanish into the shadows with their gold clattering uselessly behind. No rank, no wealth, no charm can delay their step. Only the wheel of karma spins ahead of them, and they follow where it points. Inside the vast network of Diyu, where rivers of ink flow upward and the walls whisper the regrets of those long judged, Oxhead and Horseface do not disappear after delivering a soul to the gate. They step beyond the threshold when needed, summoned not by prayer, but by imbalance. Sometimes a spirit refuses to kneel. Sometimes a soul escapes judgment, slips through cracks between realms, or lingers too long in the world of the living, haunting homes and feeding on incense smoke and sorrow. When these occur, when the system falters, or a rebellious soul grows too bold, Oxhead and Horseface are sent deeper into Diyu. Unlike the 10 kings who rule from thrones of obsidian and law, These two do not command from above. They walk through fire and rot, passing cells where tongues are pulled for lies, pits where bones grind into dust for greed, and lakes of boiling blood where corrupt officials wade eternally. In these places, they are not just escorts. They are enforcers, guards of law older than scrolls, older than gods. They find the disobedient. They bind them again. In some tales, a soul once tried to escape the third level of hell, where those who committed familial betrayal are pierced with thorns that grow from their own skin. It clawed its way to the edge, screaming that it had repented. It tried to bargain, but it had not been summoned. There had been no judgment change, only fear. And so Oxhead came, silent, heavy, his steps cracking the thorn-covered ground with each movement. He found the soul and lifted it with one hand, not cruelly, but firmly, returning it to its place. Not a word was spoken. Not a breath escaped. No flame flickered in protest. Another tale speaks of a spirit that lingered in the world too long, whispering poison into the dreams of its still living rivals. Its crimes in life had been subtle, quiet, unpunished. In death, it became bolder. It took forms. It wore faces. But Horseface followed it, through mirrors, through dreams. And when he found it, he did not strike. He only looked. The reflection cracked. The disguise failed. The soul crumbled to its true shape and followed without resistance. These stories are not just warnings. They are memory. In Diyu, even the walls remember. An ox head and Horseface are carved into every level. Statues of them stand by doors no mortal will ever see, eyes wide open, watching. Some believe they are not just guardians, but also reminders that no matter what mask you wear, no matter what lies you told, someone knows. Someone is watching. Their presence ensures the flow, the turning of karma, the unbroken bridge between the worlds. They do not judge, but they cannot be fooled. Even spirits that feed on belief cannot change what these two know. Oxhead feels the weight of the soul. Horseface sees the stain of its choices. And with those two truths, no deception survives. In the world of the living, the names of Oxhead and Horseface are rarely spoken aloud, and when they are, it is with unease. People burn incense not to call them, but to keep them away. Their names are carved on talismans, not as invitations, but as warnings. In old villages, mothers used to tell their children that if they lied too much or stayed awake whispering after midnight, the horse would sniff them out and the ox would carry them away. While these were stories to frighten the young, the fear beneath them was real. In times of war, when death comes in waves and the ground is soaked with breathless bodies, witnesses speak of seeing hooves in the mist, of hearing heavy steps echoing through corridors with no source. In peaceful cities, where someone dies suddenly in sleep or falls silently from a rooftop, there are reports of two figures vanishing into corners no human could reach. Their presence is not theatrical. They do not crack the sky or raise flames. They slip through reality in silence, separating soul from flesh as if plucking a string. One tale speaks of a wealthy man who feared them so deeply he paid monks and magicians to create a talisman, so powerful it would block the path of death itself. He wore it against his chest, surrounded by jade and gold, reciting verses every morning. But when his time came, his servants found him sitting upright, eyes wide, mouth agape, with the talisman blackened and cracked on the floor. His body was untouched, but every mirror in the house had shattered. Another story tells of a woman who tried to delay her end by carving protective seals into her own skin, using ancient symbols forgotten by most. She believed she could trap her soul inside her body after death, and for a time, it worked. Her corpse did not decay, her eyes remained glossy, but her house filled with flies. Her dreams drifted into the minds of others, and eventually, late one night, every candle blew out. Neighbors said they heard hooves on stone, even though the streets were dirt. By morning, her body was gone. Only a burned circle marked where she lay. These stories are not told to entertain. They serve as reminders. You cannot bribe them. You cannot delay them with charms, poisons, or iron gates. Some try to bargain with desperate prayers. Others offer their lives in exchange for a loved one's. But Oxhead and Horseface do not choose who lives or dies. They only answer when the choice has already been made. In the hours of twilight, when the air becomes still and a silence deeper than sleep settles over the room, their presence can be felt. Pets grow uneasy. Lights flicker. The dying suddenly stare at empty corners. The living often dismiss these signs as hallucinations or nerves. But the old ones know. When the end is near, they are already close, unseen, but not unfelt. They do not come with cruelty, but they do come without delay. In temples that no longer have roofs, in scrolls whose ink has faded into the fibers, there are signs that some once tried to honor Oxhead and Horseface as divine figures rather than feared enforcers. In some regions, small shrines were built not to repel them, but to greet them, to ask that when death came, it would be swift and dignified. Farmers left bowls of rice at crossroads where accidents had occurred, whispering that the ox and the horse might pass more gently if they were fed. Fishermen in river towns carved their faces into driftwood and tied it to their boats, believing that if they drowned, these guardians would come quickly and carry their souls without delay through the watery paths to Diyu. The line between fear and worship has always been thin, and some communities leaned into reverence rather than resistance. In the southern hills, an old cult once believed that those who died under certain stars could become attendants of Oxhead and Horseface, walking beside them in the underworld to assist in guiding souls. They performed ceremonies with black masks and robes, chanting names forbidden outside their circle. When the government discovered these rites, they destroyed the altars, burned the writings, and exiled the practitioners. But fragments of their beliefs lingered, passed secretly through oral tales. In those stories, the two guardians were not merely escorts, but teachers, capable of offering wisdom to those who truly faced death with open eyes. Artifacts have been found bearing dual symbols, one-horned and one long-faced, etched into blades, bells, and burial stones. Some tombs included paintings of the guardians not as monsters, but as silent protectors standing watch over the jury ahead. Monks debated their roles, arguing whether they acted purely on the will of Yama, or if they possessed some awareness of their own, some quiet judgment beneath their silence. One scroll tells of a monk who dreamed of dying and meeting Horseface, who asked him a single question: "Do you walk because of fear, or because it is time?" The monk awoke and left his monastery, choosing a life of service to forgotten dead, guiding lost spirits with prayer and smoke. He never spoke of the dream again, but those close to him say he never feared death after that night. Over time, as dynasties rose and fell, their images shifted. In opera, they became symbols of inevitability, entering stage in sudden silence, turning the tide of scenes with a single gesture. In shadow puppetry, they were figures of tension, never the main characters, but always present in the corner of fate. Children grew up with rhymes about their footsteps. Scholars debated if they were myth or memory, but the fear remained. Even when treated with reverence, their nature was never softened. Offerings may have been made, but they were never invited to stay. Their names were marked at doorways during funerals, and their images were painted with space between the eyes, a sign that one should never stare directly into them. Whether feared or venerated, Oxhead and Horseface remained what they always were: the first to greet you after your final breath, and the last to let go before judgment begins. Oxhead and Horseface do not always appear at the moment of death. There are times when their presence manifests before the soul is fully released, not by accident, but as a signal that the end is approaching, or that balance has been disturbed. In regions where ancestral offerings have been neglected for generations, where the dead are not remembered and graves lie broken beneath moss and silence, their figures are seen more often. In one village carved into the cliffs above a dried riverbed, the sound of hooves echoed nightly through stone corridors, even when no animals lived nearby. Children awoke screaming, claiming to have seen a long-faced man watching them from the ceiling. No deaths had occurred in months, yet the presence of Horseface lingered. Soon after, a hidden burial site was uncovered during a land-clearing ritual, revealing dozens of bodies never properly given rest. Only after offerings were made and the ground sealed did the echoes stop. In another region, a farmer digging a new irrigation trench unearthed a skull with ceremonial markings. That night, Oxhead appeared in his barn, not as a shadow or illusion, but standing in full form beside the oldest ox in the herd. The animal refused to eat or move until the man reburied the remains with incense and soil taken from a temple. The next day, the sky cleared after weeks of storms. These events are not stories meant to scare. They are records of presence. When their forms cross into the realm of the living ahead of death, it is never random. It is correction. They serve as reminders that disrespect for death disrupts the wheel. In cities too large to notice the quiet signs, their work is more subtle. Elevators stall with no explanation in buildings where accidents are about to occur. Surveillance cameras capture tall figures that vanish between frames in hospitals where patients are marked for crossing. In every case, their appearance is not to cause harm, but to enforce rhythm. Death is not chaos. It is a continuation. And when something threatens that continuity, when rituals are ignored, when the flow between realms is blocked, they arrive to restore order. Mediums and death workers speak of moments when the room changes. A pressure fills the air, as if the ceiling presses downward. Lights dim without flickering. The space behind mirrors becomes too deep to reflect. These signs mean the guardians are near, not yet collecting a soul, but watching. There are those who mistake these signs for curses or hauntings, but they are neither. They are presence. Their forms are not always seen with eyes. Sometimes they manifest through feeling. A coldness in the bones. A sound of breathing that does not match the bodies in the room. A sense that you are being watched by something older than fear. And when death does come to those marked, it is smooth, quiet, inevitable. The path has already been cleared. When the time of death arrives and the final thread of life is cut, there is no negotiation. Oxhead and Horseface are already there, standing where no gate was opened, waiting where no steps were heard. Their presence is instant, but the soul does not always realize it. Some souls remain confused, unaware that the warmth in their chest is memory, not reality. They try to speak, to touch, to scream at the bodies lying below, but the living cannot hear them. In these moments, Horseface moves closer, his gaze deep and patient, watching until the soul begins to understand. Oxhead does not wait. He turns toward the path that no longer connects to the living world, and it opens at his pace. The journey that follows is not always linear. For those who clung too tightly to life, the path may twist through mirrors and broken memories, through empty streets that echo familiar voices, designed to test whether they can truly let go. Some souls walk calmly, others must be pulled, but no soul walks alone. The two guardians are always near. In special circumstances, they are joined by silent figures, beings without names, shaped by moonlight and smoke, who assist in stabilizing the boundary if the death was unnatural, violent, or interfered with by mortal hands. These are rare cases, and when they happen, the appearance of Oxhead and Horseface becomes more intense. Their robes flare with symbols not seen in centuries. Their badges pulse with energy from the underworld itself. They do not speak, but their will is felt across both realms. Those who die with unresolved vengeance or shattered identity sometimes resist the pull, fragmenting across dimensions, scattering pieces of self in places where they were most hurt or most feared. The guardians collect them all. It takes time. It takes presence. But no soul, no matter how broken, escapes the journey. Once whole again, the soul is brought through the veil that separates memory from consequence. The space between realms is neither light nor dark. It shifts like breath, revealing flashes of the soul's life, not as images, but as weight. The guardians do not interfere. They walk steadily, without judgment, through what the soul must now face alone. But their presence ensures the soul does not fall into madness or wander into voids where time dissolves. Upon reaching the gates of Diyu, the ground becomes firmer, the air heavier, and the pull of truth undeniable. Spirits nearby whisper without tongues. The gates open only when the soul arrives with them. No other force can summon entry. Inside, the 10 kings await, and the scrolls of karma lie open. The guardians do not enter the court. Their task ends at the threshold. They step back into the mist as the soul is pulled toward reckoning. But their duty is not done. Another breath has failed elsewhere. Another thread has snapped. And once again, they walk. In the great structure that holds Diyu together, Oxhead and Horseface serve not only as escorts, but as stabilizers of the boundary itself. They are not creatures of whim or symbols of myth. They are constant, acting under the authority of forces older than names. Their movements ripple across realms, keeping balance between the dead and the living. In rare situations, when the balance of karma becomes unstable, when too many deaths occur unjustly, or when souls begin slipping into the mortal world without form, Oxhead and Horseface manifest more forcefully. Earthquakes with no geological cause, wind that howls without source, animals fleeing from empty roads, all mark their passage. Spiritual practitioners trained in ancient disciplines can sometimes sense them. These practitioners report overwhelming pressure in the chest, uncontrollable weeping, and visions of doorways carved from bone and fire. The presence of the two is never mistaken. When they cross into mortal awareness, reality bends to acknowledge them. Even heaven itself pauses, for what they do is sacred and uninterruptible. In a mountain temple surrounded by mist, a monk once sat in meditation for 9 days, refusing food or sleep. On the final day, both guardians appeared, not in physical form, but in the folds of space around him. He opened his eyes and asked, "Am I next?" Horseface stood still. Oxhead raised a single finger, not to answer, but to point toward the village below. Hours later, an avalanche buried the valley. The monk was later found alive, uninjured, his hut untouched. He said nothing afterward, but carved their images into stone and placed them at the entrance to the new temple built on the site. The villagers did not question this. They knew what had walked that path. Their authority crosses all castes, all realms, all boundaries of belief. They do not answer to prayer. They do not respond to ritual, but they see all. From royal chambers to prison cells, from battlefield trenches to lonely mountain passes, they appear when the line is crossed. Not because they choose to, but because the world requires it. Their continued existence is not folklore. It is structure. Every soul moves forward because they walk. Every death leads to consequence because they carry. And though they have no voice in judgment, no hand in punishment, their role is more vital than any king or priest or god. Without them, the dead would drift. Diyu would collapse into the living world. Suffering would multiply without end. Even the Jade Emperor acknowledges their necessity. Their forms are painted into ceilings of celestial halls, not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. Their horns and muzzles, their silent gait, their unwavering grip, these are not for fear. They are for order, and they continue, always unseen until the final breath, always watching where time thins. They do not rest. They do not falter. As long as breath exists in the living and silence in the dead, Oxhead and Horseface remain in motion. Their forms are constant reminders that no action passes without consequence, no life ends without recognition. They are not heroes, nor are they monsters. They are the weight behind justice, the boundary between what was and what must come. They walk through storms without footprints. They move through walls without shadow. And they arrive in every corner of the world with the same quiet authority. To resist them is to resist death itself, and death does not negotiate. Their presence in stories is not to scare, but to prepare. Their names are not curses. They are truths. Each culture has a name for what happens when the breath leaves and the body remains, but in the lands governed by Diyu, the names are always the same. When they appear, you do not run. You follow. And when you reach the gates, you do not beg. You remember, because your path was built by your steps, and they are only here to show you what your footsteps created. They never ask questions. They do not look back. They are the ending of all beginnings, and they are watching.